WoW's director had to answer the real questions. That's right, guys. More stuff here coming out from the Ian Hazzikostas interview. I briefly went over some of the things that had to do with a Mythic Plus lockout, or I should say Mythic Raid lockout, and how they're actually considering removing the lockout, which I'm really excited about. But there were other things that came up in the interview that I think are really important to get into. So here we go. Let's check out this one here from Bellular and some of the important things that came out of the Ian Hazzikostas interview.
World of Warcraft game director Ian Hazzikostas has finally explained at length why WoW keeps shipping just a little bit broken, and also they even get on to basically problems with the game feeling a little bit stale. There's loads to talk about, some really great real answers, but it's a shame that Blizzard's accountants are in fact sitting right behind him having a laugh.
Oh yeah.
Because we do have money-related stories to get into today.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
Welcome back to the Warcraft news, where bug fixes do in fact cause even more bugs, and where Blizzard maybe removes a feature just to sell it back to you.
That sounds about right. Create a problem and then sell the solution, right? That's classic game development these days.
There are no bugs in Quel'Thalas. Okay, let's do the Ian interview. So Ian had an hour-long interview with Cyber, and boy did they get into some stuff. I mean, here's a quote. "We are never going to put something in a patch if it's not ready."
Is he serious? Did he really say that? I mean, I guess he means intentionally, like they're not going to release a patch intentionally, right, with having shit that's broken in it, but we all know we've had patches where things weren't ready and it clearly got released.
To which a few of us may be rolling our eyes. I mean, that's why we've pretty much all learned to grit our teeth through every patch day, as if we're stepping into a shower that we expect may be ice cold. So with a quote like that, it's hardly surprising this interview went a little bit viral. I suppose, well, there are no bugs in Quel'Thalas, there is no war in Ba Sing Se. But in all seriousness, how about we try giving Ian's statement its full context? And you know, being fair to him. So it all came about because Sai asked him for a response to basically the people who feel like WoW is being made too quickly these days. And I must confess, I'm certainly one of those people. Ian talks about player feedback and about making enough kinds of content to satisfy every different player type, even the sorts of players we don't really see online.
Look, I mean, we can all be negative about patch releases and stuff. The last one wasn't too bad. You know, but by Blizzard standards lately, which, like, you know, we've had patches that are literally not playable. The last one wasn't bad. And I will say, one thing they have been doing constantly, and why I keep telling people don't forget to give feedback, is they have been actually reacting to feedback. They have. Like, every time we've seen enough people complain about something or say something needs to be changed, Blizzard has reacted to it and done it. So that is true. They are listening to feedback, and Ian said that in the interview, and I do agree with that. I do feel like they have been listening to it.
So he talks about that, basically how broad WoW has got to be these days, but then he gets into speed. And he says that their 8-week cadence is a response to the content droughts of BFA and Shadowlands. To which I say, well, I raise you, Siege of Orgrimmar. I went through that, but guess what? So too did Ian Hazzikostas. He's been working at Blizzard for a long time indeed. But if I'm to seriously cast my mind back to World of Warcraft's past, yeah, things were pretty bad back then. The scale of content drought we used to get was it's just another order of magnitude on top of anything we may get today. So in that way, what we get today is pretty great. Now, Ian says he believes that they're moving faster and that they are not sacrificing quality in doing so. And that's where I have disagreements. Now, Ian is obviously a very media-trained man. I don't mean that in some sort of sneaky, shifty way.
Maybe they're not, like I said, he could say that, and you could say, well, they're not intentionally sacrificing quality, but clearly they don't either have the testing power or the manpower to release these patches at an 8-week cadence without some quality drop-off, because there has been. Now, every patch event, like within a week or two, has been up and running effectively. By the time the patch is released, about a week or two later, everything seems to be fixed. But the patch releases now, compared to, say, patch releases back in, like, Burning Crusade or something, no, there is a quality drop-off. It used to be patch day was very exciting and everything would work from day one. Now it's expected, like, hey, if not everything's broken, that's a pretty good patch release.
Just how things will be if you've been a game director for so long. But what's of note is when you actually watch the interview, he says all that with his full chest. He really does seem to mean it. And he goes on to say that if something isn't ready for a patch, well, they can just push it to the next patch knowing that it's not going to be far away. because of course the patch will be in 8 weeks. Now that can be compared to the old days when devs would essentially crunch like mad or skip steps to get their features done because it was their only option. There would be no other patch for many months on end, maybe 4,
Right.
5, 6 months.
One thing they did do, I will say, with this patch that seems different than the other ones, and it seemed to work, is they really did, like, drip feed the content. Like, the patch went live, but we didn't get everything that's coming in the patch from day one. Time walking was slightly delayed. The story was slightly delayed. What other? There was another feature that didn't drop on the first day. But basically, you had the patch, okay, patch day hits, but not everything's hitting on that day. And that seems to be kind of the new way of doing things is, okay, we'll drop patch day means something because it's the start of the new patch, but it doesn't mean everything's happening at once, which gives them the ability to kind of focus in on the stuff that's actually dropping that day and make sure it's working properly.
Sometimes even 7. So ironically, faster patches can let them slow down on how they develop certain bits of content, because worst case, you just bump it 8 weeks. So on the face of it, with a statement like that, you'd think that everything's going fantastic in World of Warcraft right now. It's one of those things where Ian will say something, the broad response will be, yeah, sounds good, makes sense, because he's pretty good at answering questions. The problem maybe comes in upon closer...
Yeah, yes, I see the comments. Yes, Ian is also a fellow balding man. It's just, balding, man. I don't know what to say about it. Genetically horrible thing. It just is what it is. Ian's balding from the front, I'm balding from the back. We're both dealing with that shit.
Investigation. So I have my
He
issues
looks like a
with what he's
Discord
laid out there, but I've got to build my case with Ian's other answers before we fully talk about things, because he's actually got some apparent good news, and it's this. Blizzard say they are not completely committed to the 8-week patch cycle. They evaluate PTR feedback, QA reports, and everything else when deciding if a release should go ahead or not. Basically, it seems they do a go or no-go process for patches. Now, if that's the case, then how the hell does the disaster of patch 1205 make sense? Well, Ian partially blames that on fixing bugs, because fixing bugs can create more bugs. And an example that he gives is honestly a pretty funny one. Housing was turned off on patch day. I know at least it was for people on American servers. Now, that's because Blizzard fixed a bug with a Siege of Orgrimmar elevator. Yeah, fixing an elevator broke player housing. That sounds insane, but there is a logic to it. So, a minor fix that they pushed to stop people falling through the elevator essentially broke things. And it turns out that players attaching to elevators shared some code with how decor attached itself to floors and walls. That may sound a bit silly, but you've got to understand how World of Warcraft is made. Game engines, you see, aren't some sort of huge monolithic thing. They, in many cases, especially for a big production game, they end up resembling orc technology from the 40k verse. A lot of things that are grafted together, and that means that as a project goes
they use features in creative ways, server features in creative ways. So they were using the technology that sticks you to an elevator to make sure you don't fall through the floor. That same tech was being used for the decor items. So it's housing. Yeah, it's about player housing. That's the issue, right? We just got to delete player housing from the game. No, but it's interesting, and I know that Blizzard does this all the time. They come up with creative ways to use these old server tech and the way that they do a lot of this stuff. And I will say, Blizzard's implementation of player housing, whether you use it or not, it's pretty amazing what they've done with it. But that's hilarious that fixing an elevator in Orgrimmar or in a WoD dungeon broke shit.
On and on. Well, things like this can end up happening. You have to remember that the World of Warcraft engine fundamentally is an absurdly ancient thing that's just been continually maintained and updated. Now, from this whole situation and them having to turn off player housing for a day, they did learn something, and it's this. The fix to the Siege of Orgrimmar elevator was put into a release candidate build, and it was put into that build a day before the patch launched, and because of that, it was just too late to catch the bugs that bug fix had in fact created. So, according to Ian then, they've learned from this, and future patches will be less buggy because Blizzard won't fix bugs as aggressively down to the wire. Now, if you ask me, that sounds like complete madness, but realistically, putting on software degree hat for a second, yeah, it's pretty bad software engineering discipline to have a release candidate do a bunch of bug fixes on top of that and not have time to test it before you push it to main.
Right.
Absolutely. And the real reason why it sounds like complete madness is that the devs should have more restraint. They should know better than to slip untested changes like that onto an already finished build. Now, the thing is, mistakes happen, and mistakes happen within context. It's not just dev was bad. It could very much be there is a culture of people feeling like they have to ship things
You got to
no
get
matter
shit done.
what.
Yeah.
Feeling like the 8-week patch cadence is something that they really do have to stick
Yeah,
to.
I'm sure. I mean, working in corporate America and shit, I'm sure there is that feeling that if you're the reason that a patch gets held up and doesn't get dropped in 8 weeks, and now your manager needs to explain it to his boss, and the boss needs to explain it to the top guys, yeah, you don't want you to be that guy. You'd almost rather just see the mistake happen than be the guy who responsibly says, "Yeah, we got to hold off on this patch. I think there's something broken here, and maybe I'm the one responsible for it." That doesn't feel good. It's better just to fucking blindly say, launch it, and then be like, oh shit, something happened after the fact.
Regardless of what Ian may say in an interview. So that does make me worry about the team's, effectively, cultural health and discipline. Now, with that said, let's go back to the line, quote, if something isn't ready, where Ian would say that, look, if it's not ready, it's not going to go in the patch. Well, Ian, I think your team's definition of ready actually does need some work. Because there's ready as in, this technically works. And then there's ready as in, this is a great piece of content that will surprise and delight our paying subscribers. I think the entire team are sitting way too close to the first definition of ready, i.e. it is technically shippable. And I think they really need to move towards the second definition. And the interview with Sai does actually cover that. And to get a feel for what I actually mean, take, say, Void Assaults. Yes, they mostly worked, but they were very clearly just filler content. There's the marksmanship rework of 1205.
Yeah, they were, obviously. I mean, now that we know Blizzard's getting rid of them, like they're not continuing forward with them, they were kind of filler content. But sometimes stuff that we've labeled as filler content in the back in the day, it actually turns out like they were testing some kind of feature with it that's coming down the line. Could even be like a Last Titan feature, right? But we see that first implementation of it show up in the game somewhere, and we're like, oh yeah, that does remind me of that. Okay, that's why they put that in the game. So we have seen that before. I didn't expect these things to continue on forever. These Void Assaults, like they're cool, and they were fun for that time. But I think we have enough like off-brand ways of getting gear, like with delves and everything else. And we know that these labyrinths are coming, which are these giant delves soon. I don't think we need like 17 other ways to solo grind gear. So it was fine for what it was.
Which was also technically ready, but in reality was a massive downgrade. Now, by contrast, ritual sites and showdowns are very solid. Very few people have complaints about them, but
I said Void Assaults, but what I meant to say was ritual sites. I think that this was a kind of a cool feature, but I knew it wasn't going to go on forever.
Very few people seem to be excited for them, or about them. So what I think is happening here, honestly, is that WoW's current patch cadence is forcing Blizzard to develop content that people will play, perhaps because they're incentivized to, but not necessarily content that they'll actually care about. And I think that is reflected in the air, the miasma of apathy that seems to have floated into Midnight post people hitting 12.0 and the initial rush. Now, it's a good thing Sai asked Ian about this problem as well. He essentially asked how Ian and the team plan to keep World of Warcraft from going stale. You know, we get dungeons, raids, delves, and some assault-like thingy, which does mean we pretty much always know exactly what's coming in the game.
True.
It's as if WoW has found a groove, but now that groove is getting a little bit boring. It very much could be that the content that Blizzard think to make is scoped to fit in that groove and in that 8-week cadence. And it could be that that is a constraint or a target that fundamentally changes the scope and the type of content that they feel like they're able to make and put into the game. And that is where I'm happy to say there's actually some good news, because it turns out that Ian seems to think about this problem a lot, and he admits to Sai that the game is actually harder to develop now. Basically, when we're all mad about certain things like borrowed power, mythic plus affixes, or the jailer being a bit lame, Blizzard knows exactly what to fix. But whenever players are bored, they're just getting bored, well, Blizzard kind of has to be creative, right? Because whenever a player is bored, they tend to not leave feedback. They just quietly drop off and do something else.
The Irish goodbye.
We get some good news. Ian says that change for the sake of change is probably worth doing. Now, obviously, there's a way where that could come off as reckless, but I do think there is a good point. And specifically, Ian brings up the topic of raids. That's because raiding has largely been the same since 2014. They're now sprucing it up, though, with better Great Vault rewards and a whole bunch of other changes.
Yeah, these changes
to
are great.
gearing, which is pretty damn good.
Finally, now doing heroic raid will actually give you an exciting vault, right? You get myth track gear by doing heroic raid in your vault. This is a great change.
Obviously, I think we also need this type of thinking in the actual content that gets scoped out. But ultimately, that's our read in the interview. There's way more granular detail about the likes of, say, mythic raiding, so if you're super down for that, obviously go and check out Sai's video. And the last thing I'll say before we get into the other news topics is, overall, it's good to hear Ian talk about complacency being the enemy. Obviously, we just need to see if they have any meaningful change coming. I would say, I think they've shown that 8-week patches are technically workable, but something will have to change before long. 1207's launch was not all that buggy, actually, but it's almost worse than being broken. What ended up happening is Blizzard kind of buried excellent features in a patch that the community was not excited about. The likes of Heroic World Tier should have had us all dancing in the streets. So if I was in Ian's shoes, I would think about when in the season gameplay is released. I would actually front load it more, and I would try to think about supporting healthy gaming patterns within the MMO, which I'd say isn't just evenly playing it and evenly being retained across an entire 6-month period of time. No, it's jumping in, no-lifing for 3 weeks, taking a bit of a break, maybe playing the 0.5 patch, and then probably just that's it. Because at the end of the day, if it feels like a season is being bulked out by pro-retention filler, even if that's not what Blizzard intends as developers and game makers, well, that feeling will just create apathy, and that'll mean less excitement for upcoming patches, and I think that's something we sadly have seen with patch 12.1.
Yeah.
And now it's time to talk about...
people were saying heroic raid is boring. Well, the good thing about like heroic raid, okay, yes, it does get boring eventually, right? We put it on a regular clear schedule and you start just clearing that thing pretty easily. But one reason why it's boring is you outgear it real quick, especially if you're doing Mythic Plus. Because Mythic Plus is just going to give you gear that's so much better in terms of item level and like for less effort. So yeah, it does become boring. The good thing is if they ever do remove Mythic Lockout, right? That'll make things a lot more interesting because then you actually get to try the hardest content in the game without worrying about being locked out on a first boss, which means more people are going to pug that shit, which means overall more people are going to get into it. That's why I think removing Mythic Lockout is so important.
About money. So, do you remember this thing? It's a bit weird, but it's called the Rostrum of Transformation. It's in Midnight, but for Midnight, it's basically useless. Now, you see, the whole context for this is that Dragonflight gave us these really cool customizable dragon mounts, and then they scatter the world full of variations and customizations for those mounts. Then, The War Within gave us a new customizable mount every season. Of course, those were the ones that were tied to Delves. Midnight then gives us nothing on that front, nothing in terms of customizable mounts. Or should I say, nothing for free. Enter then the Stoneforge Sentinel.
the new
$30 mount with over 300,000 variations. And if you knock 4 zeros off that, you get its price, $30. And if you look at it closely, it's extremely obviously pieced together from models made for World of Warcraft: The Last Titan, our next expansion. This is something that very often happens with store mounts, by the way. Now, the store description calls it, quote, chiseled from enduring stone and awakened by ancient power, which definitely means it's some sort of Titan creation, or a bunch of Titan creations mashed together. Now, I talk about this because it's the only mount this expansion that actually uses the Rostrum of Transformation, which sounds a hell of a lot like Blizzard selling us a feature that we used to have for free. Obviously, that doesn't feel good, and it's also really to no one's surprise. Blizzard is obviously trying to level up their monetization game. By now, we're well used to getting future models for sale in the store. Hell, back in the day, we used to look at store mounts for clues about upcoming expansions. Not that we need to do that because we know The Last Titan is on its way. And look, I know that to many of you, this is all a bit of an eye roll. Why are we still complaining about this sort of thing? Well, for me, it's really simple. I just want to do anything I can to tip the scales in a more consumer-friendly way. Ultimately, World of Warcraft is a buy-to-play and pay-to-play MMO. You buy it at full price, you then pay a subscription fee, and I think that does mean that the likes of this just feel extra bad.
Yeah, I mean, it's $30, and I'm like, oh, are people going to pay for it? People are going to pay for it. They gave us a $90 long boy, which had, I mean, that one had some actual utility to it. That's why people paid $90 for that. But these store mounts, I'm telling you, people buy them. That's why they put them out there, and that's why they make them. And I'm not hating on anyone who buys that shit. You got $30, you're an adult, you can go spend that money however you want. Um, but it is sad sometimes that some of the coolest mounts definitely come through the store.
Speaking of things feeling extra bad, it's time for some detective work. Now, do you remember the $75 housing bundles? People didn't love them. And here's where it gets interesting. Data mining picked up 2 more exteriors on the PTR, so basically a full new model for your in-game player house. And you guessed it, they are tagged as shop items. Naturally then, this kicked up a little bit of a stink, and that's because they were all tagged as fall. So basically, it looked like Blizzard were planning to keep selling season-themed stuff on that store, seemingly at the expense of housing decor, being integrated into, say, the in-game holidays, or at least integrated more fully. Now, other data mining then happened and added more fuel to the fire, and that's because there's
that's
a
a cool
ton
little
of shopped
cart
tagged
there.
fall harvest decor in the build as well. Now, the thing is, that's actually not even the real story here, because the real story is that all of this helped us prove something, and that's that the housing bundle backlash actually rattled Blizzard. Why? Well, because Blizzard hit up Mr. GM with an immediate clarification to his tweet talking about the data mining, and they did it so fast, they may have made a huge mistake and they may have let their plans slip. You see, they say that a new exterior is coming, and probably more in the future, and that this exterior in particular is not going to be on the shop. But the weird thing is that Mr. GM's tweet shows 2 exteriors, not 1. And it's the same story on the official forum. A poster mentioned the decor pack and 2 exteriors, and Kaivax's response only promised that 1 exterior would stay off the shop. Now obviously, it may be a quick mistake, and maybe it's Kaivax just trying to put out the fire before it spreads. But what if we were to take them on their word, as they have written their word, on these 2 different posts? Well, with that wording, it seems possible, perhaps likely, that we'll get 1 in-game exterior and then 1 in the shop.
Yeah, and I don't think people mind that. As long as there's an in-game option available, they don't get as mad about the fact that there's 1 on the shop too, and maybe I like that colorway, but it's okay, I'll get the 1 in the game. It's when they take the coolest shit, obviously, and just put it all in that freaking Hearthsteel store. And now oh, okay, Blizzard's putting their best work into the Hearthsteel shit, obviously, for money greed reasons. So, make 1 available via the game, I think people will be okay with it. And that's why they needed to run and clarify it, because they've already gone through this once and people were pissed.
But what's more worrying is the fact that they completely ignored the data mine store decor.
There's not a single 1 on the trading post exterior in my neighborhood. I think they should put 1 on the trading post for sure. Put 1 on the trading post. I think that's such a good place to put that stuff with Trader's Tender and everything.
To this realm.
GP, thank you for the follow. Welcome to our Scourge. I feel like Blizzard underutilizes the trading post. That thing is great because it incentivizes you to log in and play, right? And you get your monthly, group of freaking Trader's Tender and shit. And it gives you a way to basically, you're paying your sub and it's like an added benefit on top of your sub. So you're still technically paying for it. Right, Blizzard's still making money, technically, because you kept your sub alive for another month and got more Trader's Tender. But at the end of the day, you don't feel like you're being duped. Like, it's just part of your sub. And, hey, I got this cool outdoor decor shit. I think Blizzard should really start putting more on the trading post.
Because if the fall-themed exterior is there for free, but all of the accompanying decor is something you've got to buy for
You meant that, but yeah, I'm talking trading post for sure.
Then it almost feels a bit worse. It's the classic salesman trap, like selling you a coffee machine or a printer that only accepts overpriced official coffee or ink pods. Blizz, I know we're a captive audience, but if you're gonna try and screw us, at least don't be sneaky about it. And also, don't be snarky either. In Kaivax's forum post, he says that this is a good example of how initial data mining can be misleading. Come on, man. You are the ones who pushed that to the PTR build with the stuff tagged as being a shop item. And it's generally the case that things on PTR marked as store items do in fact end up being store items. So, Blizz, Kaivax, you can correct the record, you can do your clarification without taking a dig. Because in doing a dig like that, all it does is make you guys seem out of touch. It makes you seem like you have a bunker mentality where you all just feel hard done by. And you know what? Professionally speaking, that's not my problem. That's not players' problem. And it absolutely comes off as a similar family of smug comeback as the whole "you think you do, but
right.
you don't" that was so infamous at BlizzCon. But at the very least, it was quite funny seeing Blizzard try to dodge a bullet, but in trying to dodge a bullet, they basically dodged right into another bullet that hit them. But hey, at least we know in the store stuff, they're feeling pretty rattled. And that's a good thing. They should feel rattled. Housing has so much potential to be amazing for the game, yet it does feel in many ways a little bit underserved. Maybe Blizzard should actually release, say, the other race exteriors, instead of stringing us along with shop items.
Right.
Maybe they should see shop items as something that they have to earn in return for delivery. Delivery perhaps of things like maybe the housing roadmap that was promised so long ago, because it's been a while.
Yeah, we
and
never
thing
got
is
that.
starting to feel like an elephant in the room.
Yeah, look, housing has a lot of potential for the game. I mean, look, GP at home, he's saying he's a housing main. I mean, there are people that play this game, definitely, that just, like, enjoy the housing stuff, and they play the game to collect housing stuff. So certainly you do alienate those people if you put the really, really cool shit only on the store. It's okay, I understand it's about making money at the end of the day, and the Blizzard wants to make money and keep, appease the Xbox overlords and Microsoft overlords. But you should also always give like a one-off off-ramp option in the game via trading post or something else where some of these cool items or a color variation of it is also available in the game. That's it. And if somebody really wants to nitpick and be like, oh, but I really like the purple colorway, I'll pay some money for it, that's fine. But to make the coolest shit only available via money, yeah, you do. You make people feel like they're getting duped, for sure.
There is, in fact, another elephant in the room, and that's been that as raiders, you feel like going to raid for the sake of gear is just completely pointless, because you get so much gear so much faster from so many other places. Well, guess what? The next patch of WoW is actually fixing that inequality that exists within gear. It is really exciting for so many players, and there's way more changes than just the one that impacts raiders. And look, as much as Blizz can be frustrating, at the end of the day, when you look at, say, their encounter design, art team, so many of those things, they are genuinely best in class, best in industry. I am excited to jump into the new raid, and with all the changes that are coming to gearing, I'm even more excited. You can find out about it in the next video.
Yeah, no, I mean, we looked at the boss animations for the next raid. That thing looked freaking amazing. Like, Blizzard does still make really good shit. There's just some things along the way in these patch cycles, even though Ian said they don't really, we don't release broken patches. That's basically what he said. No, they do. They clearly do. And whether or not he means it that they don't intentionally release broken patches, okay, fine. We could semantic argument that shit all day. But clearly the 8-week patch cycle, Blizzard's getting a little bit better at it recently. I think the way they're handling it is they're deciding, well, patch day, we'll release the shit that we know works, and everything else we'll drip feed it after to give us more time to fix shit and make sure it's not broken. Fine. We'll get patches that way from now on. Overall, a nice video from Bellular. Interesting stuff from Ian.